Good morning, grade 11s and grade 12s, wherever you are. I wanted to redo conflict management. I do have a video that I did many years ago, which the sound isn't that great. So let me restart redoing the videos for you. So, conflicts. How do you define conflict? It seems negative. Conflict comes about when there is a misalignment of ideas. But conflict can also bring about new ideas and learning. When it is a good conflict, you actually come away from that thinking, wow, I've learned something and I'm a better person for it. So there are two types of conflict. You've got functional conflict and you've got dysfunctional conflict. In a work environment, you are going to have a lot of functional conflict. You're going to be in meetings where people are going to disagree and they're going to state that they do not agree with what you've said, and because of this, you can't take these things personally. When you are in business, you need to kind of hone in on the subject and not the person. When you start honing in on the person, it then starts becoming dysfunctional. If your sensitivity is up, if you get defensive, it starts becoming dysfunctional conflict. So I always just say keep to the subject. It's not about the person, it's about what you're actually discussing. So functional conflict is where you've got different parties that are dealing with conflict in a manner that is healthy. It is positive. Okay. So, in order for it to be functional, you need to have respect. You need to listen to the other person. I always say that, and it's a very difficult thing, is to actually listen. Keep quiet, listen. Let them finish. Don't interrupt. Listen. Acknowledge what that person has said. Oh, I hear what you're saying. I see what you're saying. However, I still don't agree. Are you saying ba 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 ba? So you summarize it for them to say, okay, I understand what you're saying, but I don't agree. You can still not agree. It's absolutely fine. And then as long as you're backing up why you don't agree and you've got facts, you need to have a look at compromising sometimes. In a conflict, functional conflict, there will be compromise. Okay, I understand that you want to move the fashion, this trend to that corner. However, I really do believe that we're going to miss feet in the store going through to that section. Let us move it to the middle. Let's move it to a middle section. So you start compromising. So it's a win-win situation for both parties. What also happens in companies is that you've got something called where you play the devil's advocate. And managers do this actually, where they will then say, okay, you want to do this, I don't agree. Why do you want to do this? So, as an employee, you are now kind of having to justify why you believe that this is the right thing to do for the business. It's not that the manager disagrees with you, he's just bringing about kind of positive interaction about with everybody, a healthy debate, if you will. And from that, you can all kind of get each other's feel and where everybody is for that particular project. You got to be careful though, playing devil's advocate. You kind of have to steer it. I mean, my boss used to do that so often and then would say, but I agree with you right at the end. Yes, I agree with you. But he played that he hadn't agreed right from the beginning so that we kept on asking the right questions. We kept on answering the questions so that in our minds, we knew that that project was where we needed to be. The outcome of a positive, functional conflict is that you are going to create awareness of a problem. You can't keep quiet. You have to be able to say, our flip flops in our store are not selling. Why aren't they selling? Be aware of the problem. It's summer. We can't understand. Is our pricing wrong? So that you start doing a competitor analysis. You come back and you say, oh my goodness, our pricing for our flip flops is way out. We might need to do a buy one, get one free. Let's do a promotion around flip flops. Let's put them together with the towels. Let's kind of put them together with the sun lotion, the sunglasses. So cross-merchandise those flip-flops. It brings about creativity. So when you have a problem and when there's conflict, people can start brainstorming and you start coming up with good solutions. What about this? What about that? Any misconceptions can be cleared. So in this, when it's positive conflict, you are then kind of going through the motions to say, but I don't understand why you don't agree with this. Why don't you agree? And then when the person has eventually told them exactly how they've come to that conclusion, you go, oh, I understand now. I thought it was because you don't like this, but you've actually done your research. You actually understand the business, and that's why you're making this statement. Functional conflict also brings about clarification of an issue, so you're clarifying things, and cooperation with people. You have to learn to work with people. And functional conflict can be good as long as it doesn't get personal. You got to keep to the subject. Don't take it personally. Don't start with snarky comments. Don't personally attack the person. You really have to keep it to the subject and be respectful at all times. Just from a current affairs point of view, I just had a look at some conflict that's happening. IOL published this in January the 30th, 2024. So, clothing retailers must shoulder blame for deplorable working conditions. In South Africa, our clothing and apparel retailers need to up their working conditions. This was they actually did a visit in Mandeni in KwaZulu Natal, and they found that the employees were being treated very badly. So this could lead to other types of conflict. This could lead to a strike. This could lead to grievances laid. This could lead to them taking legal action. So some of the deplorable working conditions that they are facing, and this is in South Africa, 12 long working hours with only 30 minutes lunch breaks. There are restrictions when going to the toilets and having lunch in areas that are unsanitary. Some chemicals used in the factories were not handled correctly. There is no personal protective equipment, and in some instances, they are placed in front of fire equipment. They are also being paid below the minimum wage, which is shocking. So they were being paid 10 Rand per hour, 10 Rand per hour, instead of the industry minimum of 25 Rand 42 per hour. So this is really a very good current affair that you could be bringing up in the clothing industry. This is shocking. So there really are the people that are working and in the factories, as much as it's happening in China, it's happening in South Africa as well. The difference between China and South Africa, it is illegal in South Africa, where in China they are ruled by different laws. Okay, so let's go into dysfunctional conflict. Dysfunctional conflict, you are going to have a decline in productivity. This is done with how you involved in dysfunctional conflict, misperceptions. You are not understanding what the person is saying. You don't know where they're coming from. It's almost like management, in true words, saying, by the way, we are now going to be discontinuing a certain shoe line. And in the store, they're going, why? Why are they discontinuing these shoes? They sell so well in my store. I don't understand why. So the misperception is that management is not sharing why they are doing certain things. So they might have found the shoe factory is not paying minimum wage. The shoe factory has very, very dodgy working conditions. And that's why they've decided to discontinue that line while they try and find someone else. So if management had explained that, the misperception there would be no misperception. Everyone would understand, that's why you've made that decision. Dysfunctional conflict is your unwillingness to compromise. I will not, this is what we're doing, tough. You can't work in a business environment unless, your unwillingness to compromise is because it is illegal or unlawful. But if management is saying something and you don't want to compromise with it, it becomes a problem. Misunderstandings, and of course, Poor communication. Dysfunctional conflict is your miscommunication. What does all of this do? Well, of course, it's going to hinder performance. People are not going to be performing. You've now discontinued the shoes. I get paid a commission on those shoes. I cannot understand why. Today, when I get to work, I'm going to have a go slow. I'm going to work as slow as I possibly can. Dysfunctional conflict can lead to wasting resources, time, because you keep having to discuss and go over this because there's no compromise. No one wants to move and budge from this. It becomes counterproductive because you are in business to make money and now all you're doing is fighting and not getting anything done. And then, of course, no cohesiveness. When you don't have cohesiveness in your business, people are not going to want to work hard for you because they don't feel part of a cohesive team. There's no synergy. What are the outcomes of dysfunctional conflicts? Mistrust, blaming, backstabbing, gossip. Oh my goodness, I have been in corporations where there is lots of backstabbing and gossip. Stress. Dysfunctional will bring about stress. And then when you stress, can you work? Can you perform? No. Low morale, a high staff turnover. People will leave the business. A high staff turnover costs a lot of money for the business because you have trained that person up. They know how to work and now they're leaving. That means you have to go right back and do the recruitment, which costs money, time. And then you've got to do the training, money, time. There's a waste of time and resources. And dysfunctional conflict can also lead to violence, where people actually start throwing punches in the workplace. And that would be really, really, really dysfunctional. And I don't know how you mend that. Sure, you'd have to go through quite a lot of training, retraining, probably some counseling. That would be very hectic. So, what are some of the reasons for conflict? Okay, you need to know how to talk about these reasons. Well, ego. A person's ego is definitely a reason for conflict. Egos often get in the way of people that they don't want to budge, they don't want to compromise because they feel that they are the best. So, how does your manager respond to that? First of all, you're going to assess the situation. Get all the information, manager. You need to understand, why is this person being the way they are? If the conflict can't be resolved between your employees, you then have to intervene. You then have to make a call. You then have to put your foot down and say, listen, this is what's happening. And remember to focus on the business at hand. When you are dealing with egos, do not focus on the person. Focus on the situation, on the what the conflict is about, and keep it as objective as possible. Do not get personal. Another reason for conflict is differences in culture, backgrounds, and values. So people have different ways of doing things. And we need to understand that in a company. It is very cosmopolitan in a company. You have people from all walks of life. You cannot assume that everyone is the same. That's why you have a code of ethics in your company. That's why you would have training. So your manager response would be to have sensitivity training, culture training, diversity training. You're going to develop skills, and you need to have some sort of training or development on EQ, which is emotional intelligence, how to handle things in certain situations. So remember what I said, code of ethics there and diversity training. That would definitely come up. Another reason, poor communication. Oh my goodness, this is the biggest one in every organization. Communication is always an issue. So poor communication, what does that lead to? Well, that leads to role overload. Now, what is a role overload? That is when one person is doing far too much. Their role has been completely overloaded. So you are the cashier in a fashion store, but now you also have to do the merchandising, and you have to receive the stock, and you have to help customers on the floor. How are you going to do that? And I've walked into some stores that it's a one-man band. It makes it very difficult. There's role conflict that happens with poor communication, that they don't know what their role is. What am I? Am I the cashier? Am I on the floor? Am I doing the merchandising? I don't know where I'm supposed to be. So when you have role conflict, there's no communication. You have no idea what to do. So then what gets done? Nix. And then the last one is your role ambiguity. And that is where you do not understand what you need to be doing. You're not sure of what actually has to happen. So the team members don't know who's doing what. As a manager, how are you going to solve this? Well, you have to remove the barriers of communication. So, poorly phrased messages need to be reworked. You need to be clear with your communication. A poor use of language, again, you need to have more detail. You really do need to explain to people what's happening. Distorting messages is another way of having a poor communication. And as a manager, you need to really try and unpack and show them exactly what needs to be done. And then any interruptions, that is a barrier. You need to remove those barriers. So if you as a manager standing up and saying, right, this is what we're doing today, and then someone interrupts you, you're going to say, I'm going to be explaining something. I'd really like it if there are no interruptions while I talk so that everybody understands what needs to happen today. Another reason for conflict is change. People do not like change. Oh my goodness. When I worked at Kimberly Clark, we changed our computer system and it was devastating for some people that they actually left. They left. They could not deal with the change. So a manager has to have change management. You're going to take your employees through a process. Okay. So you're going to so say, for example, Truworths have now changed their computer system. You're going to explain why. You're going to then say to them, this is how training is going to happen. You're going to make sure that you're there every step of the way. Your employees need to understand why it is important for you to change. If you don't bring in your employees into the change, I promise you your change is going to be shocking. You cannot just autocratically say we are changing and that's that. You must explain why. If people understand the why, they are much more susceptible to changing. So you need to have two-way communication and buy-in from the staff and of course training. Training. The next reason for conflict is limited resources. Of course, you're going to have some sort of limited resources, and competition is also a reason for conflict. Okay. So competition in this instance is between the team members. So it's good to compete with your fellow colleague. Of course it is. But it can become a little toxic. So as a manager, you really need to make sure that they keep aiming the competition, that it's at the business objectives, that it doesn't become personal. Unresolved issues, any previously unresolved issues can erupt in conflict in the future. So if you haven't resolved certain issues as a manager, be very careful. It could come up and bite you in the butt. Okay. So what does the manager need to do? You need to try and resolve as many issues as possible, but you are going to get those silly that you see as silly issues, and you kind of then just are not going to deal with it. We're not dealing with that right now. We will come back to it. Be very wary if you don't deal with something, it can become bigger. So, in all honesty, when someone does come up with an issue, try and resolve it as quickly as you possibly can. So, this is a question that I've seen come up many, many times in IEB, and that is make recommendations regarding the management of conflict. So, what recommendations would you do? So, we've also gone through what management responses you could do, but they do like these words. I've also seen this in shorter questions where they give you the word and you need to explain it. So, the accommodating approach is where you are not assertive, but you are wanting to be cooperative. Okay, so you're not assertive, you're not asserting your ideas, your beliefs. So you then kind of compromise and say, okay, let's do that. But remembering you're neglecting your own interests. So you are accommodating that person. Avoiding is where the person opts to avoid the conflict altogether. So you ignore it. Sometimes you have to. You know what? Sometimes you gotta just ignore it and you just gotta smile and wave. Hey? Or you postpone it and you just say, you know what, let's deal with this next week. This week we've just got a bit of a hectic, hairy week. Let's deal with that next week. Then there is the collaborating and cooperating approach, and that is where it's a win win. Both parties are coming up with an idea that they're meeting each other in the middle, and it becomes a win win situation. The next approach is a competing approach, and that is where the individual is not prepared to give in. And sometimes you have to be like this. Sometimes you have to say, I'm sorry, but we are going to be paying minimum wage. We cannot pay our staff 10 Rand for 12-hour shifts that are illegal. We will be abiding by the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. So you are then in that competing approach. And then the last approach is your compromising approach, which is very similar to your collaborating and cooperating. So compromising is where you're going to find an acceptable solution. So you keep negotiating, you keep talking. I think with compromising, it takes a little bit more time. Right, grade 11s and grade 12s, that is conflict management. I wish you all the best. Have an amazing, amazing week. Bye.